My father chose my brother's camping trip over my wedding, but when I asked his husband to walk me down the aisle, they never saw coming what happened next, and it left them speechless. I'm 29 years old. I work as a freelance graphic designer, and honestly, I need to tell this because it happened 3 months ago and I'm still processing everything. My wedding was exactly 94 days ago. I know because Christopher, my now husband, reminds me every time he sees me staring into space thinking about this whole mess. The thing is, my father wasn't there. And it wasn't because he was sick or because there was an emergency, but because he decided to go camping with my brother Alexander. Yes, you read that right. Camping? But to understand why that destroyed me so much and why I did what I did afterwards, I need to go back quite a bit, because this story actually started like 29 years ago, the day I was born. I grew up being basically invisible in my own house. My mom, Margaret was her name. She died 6 years ago from cancer. But before that, there was this whole drama because she had an affair that ended in divorce when I was like 14. My dad, Thomas, remarried Richard. Yes, Richard is a man. My dad is gay and came out of the closet after the divorce, which was a whole revelation for everyone, but honestly, that part isn't the important thing here. What's important is that for as long as I can remember, Alexander was always the favorite. Always. He's 3 years older than me. Now he's 32 and lives in London, being this successful finance executive or something like that. I don't even know exactly what he does anymore, but he makes tons of money and my dad doesn't miss an opportunity to mention it. When we were kids, Alexander got good grades and my dad would swell with pride, organize celebration dinners, buy him whatever he wanted. I also got good grades, like 8.5 average or higher, and my dad would barely say, "Well done," without looking up from the newspaper. Alexander played soccer and my dad went to all his games, screaming from the stands, recording videos, taking him out to eat afterwards. I did track and field, ran 400 meters, and my dad went to exactly 2 meets in 4 years, and in both he arrived late and left early. You know what it feels like to see all the other parents hugging their kids after a race while yours is looking at his phone because he had an important work call? Things got worse after the divorce. My mom kept us initially, but Alexander decided to go live with my dad when he was like 17 because, according to him, Dad understands me better, and Mom is too dramatic. I stayed with my mom, not because I specifically wanted to, but because someone had to stay with her, and Alexander had already made his decision. My dad interpreted that as me choosing my mom in the divorce, and things got even weirder between us. It's not like he was cruel or abusive. He never yelled at me or anything like that, but it was this constant indifference that hurt more than any screaming. When my mom got sick like 6.5 years ago, it was horrible. Ovarian cancer. Stage 4 when they detected it. My dad behaved well during that. Truth be told, he came to visit her even though they were already divorced, helped with some medical expenses. But Alexander, oh Alexander, came to visit her exactly once, for 3 days, and he spent the whole time complaining that his hotel didn't have good Wi-Fi and that he missed his gym routine. My mom died on a Tuesday afternoon. I was there holding her hand. My dad had gone for coffee and came back just in time to say goodbye. Alexander arrived 2 days later for the funeral because he couldn't get a flight earlier. My dad justified it saying, "Well, he lives very far away, it's difficult for him." After Mom's death, my dad married Richard like a year and a half later. Richard is a sweetheart of a person. Seriously. He's 52 years old, he's a history professor, cooks amazingly, and from the beginning he treated me with more warmth than my biological father had given me in years. We became close in a weird way. Like, he'd ask me how my work was going, and he'd remember things. I mentioned casually. He'd text me on Sundays asking if I wanted to go to breakfast. He never tried to be my dad. He was just present, something my real dad had never been with me. I met Christopher 5 years ago at a design expo. He's a web developer, works remotely for a company in the United States even though we live here. We connected instantly, and he's the first person in my life who makes me feel like I'm a priority. That when I talk, someone actually listens. We got engaged like a year and a half ago. It was super casual. We were at the beach on our 3.5-year anniversary, and he simply asked if I wanted to marry him. No elaborate ring or anything like that at that moment. Afterwards, we went together to pick one out. But the moment was perfect because it was genuine. We decided to have a small wedding. Christopher doesn't have much family. His parents died when he was young, and he grew up with his grandmother, who's 87 and lives in a nursing home. She's a bit disoriented but sweet. I didn't want a giant production either. So we planned something intimate in our backyard. Like 30 people. Nothing fancy. Just close ones. We chose the date of our 4-year anniversary, a Saturday in June. I told my dad 8 months in advance. 8 months. It wasn't a last-minute surprise. My dad said yes, that of course he'd be there, that he was happy for me. Alexander sent me a message saying, "Congratulations, I'll see if I can make it," which I already knew meant no, but well, I was already used to it. I continued with the plans. Hired a small catering service, simple decoration, rented chairs, basically organized everything myself with Christopher's help and Richard's, who offered to help with everything and was amazing. We made multiple trips together to rent things and choose flowers. 2 months before the wedding, my dad called me. I was in my studio working on a project with a tight deadline. It was like 10 at night. He told me, "Daughter, I need to talk to you about something important." I thought he was going to tell me he was sick or something. My stomach froze. But no. He tells me, Alexander organized a camping trip with his college friends for that weekend. It's an annual tradition they have, and it turns out this year it falls right on the date of your wedding. I stayed quiet, processing. He continued, "They've been planning this trip for years. You know how Alexander is with his traditions, and he's very excited because everyone is going, and it's been a long time since they've all seen each other." I asked him, trying to stay calm. "And you're telling me this because—" And he, oh God, he really said, "I was thinking that maybe you could consider moving the wedding a week or two so I could go camping with your brother and then be at your wedding." I know it's a lot to ask, but this trip is very important to him. I was literally speechless. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad," I said, "I told you 6 months ago. 6 months. The date is our anniversary. It's not something I picked randomly." He sighed. That sigh he does when he thinks I'm being difficult, and said, "I know, daughter, but it's just a date, isn't it? The marriage is what matters, not the specific day." Alexander really wants me to go on this trip. Something broke in me at that moment. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. It was more like an internal click, a cold clarity. I told him, "You know what, Dad? It's fine. Go camping. I'm not going to move my wedding." He was quiet for a second and then said, "Don't be like that, daughter. I'm not saying I don't want to go to your wedding." "No, of course not," I responded. "You're just saying that Alexander's camping is more important. That's perfect. I understand completely. Go, enjoy, say hi to my brother for me." And I hung up. Christopher was there. He'd heard the whole conversation because I have the bad habit of putting calls on speaker. He hugged me and didn't say anything for a while, just let me process. Finally, he asked, "What are you going to do?" And I, without thinking much, said, "I'm going to ask Richard if he wants to walk me down the aisle." He was a bit surprised. "Are you sure?" He asked me. "Completely sure," I told him. "My dad made his choice. I make mine." The next day, I called Richard. I got nervous in a way I didn't expect. Like, my hands were sweating while I dialed. I explained the whole situation to him. I probably talked nonstop for 10 minutes. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. I thought he was going to say no. That it was inappropriate. That I should try to fix things with my dad. But what he said was, "It would be an immense honor. Sophia, thank you for trusting me for this moment." And that's when I started crying. Like I cried like I hadn't cried in years. I didn't tell my dad. I simply left things as they were. He assumed we were going to go ahead with the wedding and that he'd be there when he got back from camping. Or maybe he thought I'd eventually move the date. I don't know. He didn't call me again to talk about it, and I didn't initiate any conversation either. The weeks passed. I continued with the preparations. We tried the menu with the caterer. Richard came to see how his suit fit. Everything moved forward normally. 1 week before the wedding, my dad sent me a message that said, "See you Saturday, daughter. I'm looking forward to it." I only responded, "Have a good time camping." He sent a, "What?" And I didn't respond. Like, I left him on red. I know it sounds childish, but honestly, I didn't have energy for another circular conversation where he minimized my feelings. The Thursday before the wedding, 2 days before camping, and 3 before my wedding, my dad called me. I was with the florist deciding on the final arrangements. I didn't answer. He called me 4 other times that day. I sent him a message saying, I'm busy with wedding stuff, we'll talk later. He responded, we need to talk about the weekend. And I put, there's nothing to talk about, everything is clear. On Friday, the day before my wedding, my dad left for camping with Alexander and his friends. They posted photos on social media, all smiling with their backpacks and their tents. I saw the photos because Richard showed them to me. He was also indignant, although he was trying not to show it so much. I can't believe he actually left. He told me, I can, I responded. It's exactly what I expected from him. Saturday arrived. Our backyard looked beautiful. Christopher and I had worked a whole month, fixing it up, planting new flowers, pruning everything. The weather cooperated. It was sunny but not too hot. Guests started arriving at 4 inches the afternoon. The ceremony was at 5. I was inside getting dressed, my 2 best friends helping me, and honestly, I felt calm. Sad. Yes, obviously. But there was also something liberating about finally accepting that my dad was who he was, and that I wasn't going to keep waiting for him to change. Richard arrived an hour early. He looked nervous and excited. I don't want to ruin this, he told me. I don't want you to regret it later. I assured him I wasn't going to regret it, that this was exactly what I wanted. We practiced walking down the aisle twice. We laughed because he tripped over one of the chairs and almost fell. The ceremony was perfect. Seriously. It was everything I dreamed of and more. When it was time to walk down the aisle, Richard offered me his arm and whispered to me, I'm very proud of the woman you are. We walked slowly, me holding onto his arm, and I could see Christopher at the end of the aisle with that huge smile he has, and Christopher's grandmother in the front row, even though she didn't really understand what was happening, but she was happy. Everyone was there except the 2 people who should have mattered, my dad and my brother. But in that moment, I didn't care. I had the people who really loved me. The ceremony lasted like 20 minutes. We said our vows that we wrote ourselves, exchanged rings. The officiant declared us married. We kissed. Everyone applauded. There were tears everywhere. The reception was in the same backyard. We ate, danced. I had an amazing time. We took like 1,000 photos. We literally had a professional photographer who was a cousin of a friend and gave us a special price. At the end of the night, when everyone had left except Richard, Christopher, and the friends who had stayed to help clean up, Richard hugged me and told me, today was one of the most special days of my life. Thank you for allowing me to be part of it. I responded, you're more my father than my biological dad has ever been. And I meant it. That night, already in bed, Christopher asked me if I was going to send photos to my dad. I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to do nothing. Let him figure it out on his own eventually. But another part, the part that had spent 29 years feeling invisible, wanted him to see exactly what he'd missed. So I opened WhatsApp, selected the 5 best photos, the ones that clearly showed Richard walking me down the aisle, the ones of Christopher and me at the altar, one where all the happy guests appeared. And I sent them. No message, just the photos. It was 11:47 at night. My dad saw them within 2 minutes. I saw them deliver, and that he read them. He didn't respond immediately. 5 minutes passed, then 10. At 15 minutes, he started calling me. 1, 2, 3 calls. I didn't answer. I just lay there watching the phone vibrate. Christopher asked me if I wanted to turn it off. I told him no, that I wanted to see what happened. At 12:20 a.m., my dad sent a voice message. I listened to it. He was crying, his voice breaking every 2 words. He said, Sophia, daughter, please answer me. I made a terrible mistake. I'm driving back. I'll arrive in a few hours. Please, we need to talk. Then he sent another. You can do another small ceremony tomorrow. I'll be there, please. Don't do this to me. And he continued, like 6 voice messages, each one more desperate than the last. I didn't respond that night. I eventually fell asleep, Christopher hugging me. The next morning, Sunday, I woke up to 23 messages from my dad and 11 missed calls. I got up, made coffee, sat in the backyard that still had some decoration we hadn't removed. I opened the messages. My dad had arrived at his house like at 4 inches the morning. Alexander apparently had stayed at the camping because someone had to finish the trip. At 9 inches the morning, my dad arrived at my house. I was still in pajamas, drinking my second cup of coffee. He rang the doorbell like 10 times in a row. Christopher asked if I wanted him to tell him to leave. I told him no, that it was fine. I opened the door. My dad looked destroyed. He had red, swollen eyes. He'd obviously been crying all night. He hadn't changed. He was wearing the same camping clothes, smelled like campfire and sweat. Before he could say anything, he said, "Sophia, forgive me. I made the worst mistake of my life. I need us to do another ceremony. I can call the officiant. We can do it today if you want. I'll walk you down the aisle like it should have been." I stood there looking at him, expressionless. "No," I simply told him. "What?" he asked, confused. "I'm not going to do another ceremony. I already got married. I already had my wedding. Someone already walked me down the aisle." "But it's just that," he started to say, and I interrupted him. "It's just that what, Dad? That you missed my day because Alexander's camping was more important?" "Yes, that happened, and now you have to live with that decision." He tried to grab my hands, but I pulled them away. "You don't understand," he said. "I thought you were going to move the date. I thought we were going to talk and reach an agreement. I told you I wasn't going to move the date." I responded. "I told you clearly to go ahead with your plan. You chose to believe what you wanted to believe. But you told Richard to walk you without telling me," he argued, and there something in me ignited. "And was I supposed to ask your permission? Was I supposed to beg you to come to my wedding instead of going to your favorite son's camping?" He shook his head. "It's not like that. Alexander isn't my favorite." And there I laughed, like a bitter laugh that came out without me being able to control it. "Dad, Alexander has been your favorite since I was born. My whole life I've been secondary. My whole life I've watched you celebrate each of his achievements while ignoring mine. I went to therapy for 3 years. Did you know? 3 years. Trying to process why my own father couldn't love me as much as my brother." He started crying harder. "That's not true. I love you the same." But I continued. "Do you know how many track meets you came to?" 2. In 4 years. 2. "Do you know how many times you asked me about my work, about my life, about anything that wasn't superficial?" Almost never. Meanwhile, with Alexander, it's weekly calls. It's asking him about every detail of his life in London. It's visiting him there because it's important to maintain the bond despite the distance. My dad tried to interrupt me, but I continued. "When Mom was dying, I was there every day. Every day, Dad. Alexander came once. Once. And you justified it. You always justify him." "I didn't know you felt this way," he said weakly, and that almost made me explode again. "How could you not know? I've tried to talk to you about this so many times over the years. Every time I mentioned something, you changed the subject or told me I was being sensitive, or that Alexander just had a different temperament. You made me feel crazy for years for noticing something that was obvious to anyone who knew us." Christopher came out at that moment, stood next to me, didn't say anything, but his presence gave me strength. My dad looked at him and then looked at me. "What do I have to do?" he asked. "Tell me what I have to do to fix this." "There's nothing to fix." I told him, "What happened, happened. You made your decision. I made mine. We're even." "So what, I'm not your father anymore?" he asked, and I could hear the panic in his voice. "You're my father," I responded. "But I need space. I need time to process all of this without you bombarding me with messages and calls." "How much time?" he asked. "I don't know," I responded honestly. "It could be a month. It could be 6 months. It could be a year. When I'm ready to talk to you again, I'll contact you." He tried to protest, but I raised my hand. "This is non-negotiable, Dad. You need to respect my boundaries for once in your life." He stood there another moment, seemed to want to say something more, but finally just nodded and left. During the following week, while Christopher and I prepared for the honeymoon we'd planned in Cancun, my dad sent me daily messages. They weren't long. Just things like, "Thinking of you. I hope you're well. When you want to talk, I'll be here." Richard told me afterwards that my dad was devastated, that he cried all the time, that he wasn't sleeping well. Part of me felt guilty. I'm not going to lie. But another part thought that maybe for the first time in his life, he was understanding the consequences of his actions. 3 days before we left for the honeymoon, I called him. He answered on the first ring. "Hello, daughter," he said, and his voice sounded tired. "Dad, I need you to stop sending me messages for a while," I told him directly. "Please no," he responded. "I just need to know you're okay." I'm okay, I told him. Christopher takes care of me. Richard supports me. I have my friends. I'm better than I've been in a long time. But your constant messages aren't helping me. I need real space. Not this half space where you're still there trying to force contact. For how long? He asked again. We're leaving for our honeymoon for 2 weeks, I explained. When we get back, I'll probably need at least another month after that. So it would be like a month and a half total. If by then I feel I'm ready, I'll call you. If not, I'll let you know I need more time. I could hear him crying on the other end. What if there's an emergency? He asked. Richard has my number. He can contact me if there's really an emergency. But Dad, and I mean this seriously, an emergency is if someone is in the hospital or dying, not if you feel lonely or guilty. He stayed quiet and then said, Okay, I'll respect your boundaries. Thank you, I responded, and hung up. In Cancun, on the 3rd day of our honeymoon, I received a call from an unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer, but I thought it might be from the hotel or something. It was Alexander. I hadn't heard from him since before the wedding. He hadn't even sent me a congratulations message. How? Did you get this number? I asked. I have my ways. He responded with that arrogant tone he always has. What do you want, Alexander? I asked, already irritated. I want to talk about Dad, he said. About what you're doing to him. I laughed. Literally let out a laugh. What I'm doing to him? Seriously? Yes, he continued. He's destroyed, Sophia. He's not eating well. He's not sleeping. He spends all his time crying. All because of your tantrum. My tantrum, I repeated, keeping calm because I knew that would irritate him more than if I yelled. Interesting description for what happened. He made a mistake, Alexander said. Dads make mistakes. You were supposed to be the mature one and understand that. A mistake, I said. Is that what you call 3 decades of constantly favoring you over me? Is that what you call missing my wedding for your camping? That camping was important, he argued, and I swear I almost hung up right there. More important than your sister's. Wedding? I asked. It's not the same, he said. You're going to have many anniversaries. This was a unique event with people I haven't seen in years. Alexander, I told him, and my voice was trembling now, not from sadness but from rage. Have you ever, in your whole life, considered that maybe the world doesn't revolve around you? That maybe other people also have important events? That maybe Dad could have gone to my wedding and you could have postponed your camping or gone without him? It doesn't work like that, he responded. Family supports each other. Exactly, I told him. Family supports each other. Something that neither you nor Dad did for me for years. So don't come talk to me about family when you missed Mom's funeral by 2 days because you couldn't get a flight earlier. There was silence on the other end. That was different, he finally said, but his voice sounded less sure. No, I responded. It wasn't different. It's exactly the same. It's a pattern. Things are always more important. Your events are always priority. Your feelings are always the ones that matter. And Dad has reinforced that our whole life. So if he's suffering now, maybe it's because he's finally facing the fact that his actions have consequences. You're selfish, Alexander said, and I could hear he was losing his composure. You've always been like this, always trying to get attention. Projection is interesting on you, I responded calmly. But we're done here. Don't call me again. If I'm using an unknown number, it's because you blocked your main number, which means you knew I wouldn't want to talk to you. Respect that. And I hung up. I blocked the number immediately. Christopher, who had heard the whole conversation because we were at the beach together, asked me if I was okay. Yes, I told him, and it was true. I'm fine. It's liberating in a way, you know? I was finally able to tell him all that without caring about his opinion. We enjoyed the rest of the honeymoon without more interruptions. It was 2 incredible weeks where I didn't think about my family once, except to be grateful that Richard and Christopher were part of my life. When we got back, like 3 weeks after being back and already settled into the routine again, I felt I was ready to talk to my dad. I called him on a Saturday afternoon. He answered immediately. Sophia? He asked, as if he couldn't believe it was me. Hi, Dad, I responded. Can I come by tomorrow to talk? Yes, he said quickly. Yes, of course, what time? At 2? I suggested. Perfect, he said. I'll be here. I arrived on Sunday at 2 o'clock sharp. Richard opened the door, gave me a tight hug. "He's very nervous," he whispered to me, "but he's been reflecting a lot." "Seriously?" I nodded. I entered the living room and there was my dad, sitting on the couch. He looked older than I remembered him, as if years had passed instead of 2 months. "Hello, daughter," he said, standing up. "Hi, Dad," I responded, and I sat on the couch across from him, maintaining intentional physical distance. "Before you say anything," I began, "I need to establish some things. I came to talk, not to forgive yet, and not to go back to how things were before." He nodded. His face looked expectant and scared. "I've been thinking a lot about our relationship," I continued. "About all these years. And I realized I can't keep waiting for you to change, or for you to suddenly realize how you've made me feel my whole life. That only hurts me more." "I've been going to therapy," he interrupted, "since the wedding thing. Twice a week. My therapist has helped me see many things I didn't want to see." "That's good," I told him genuinely. "I'm glad you're working on yourself." "You're right," he said, and his voice broke. "About Alexander, about the favoritism, about everything. I've seen it my whole life, and I justified it in 1,000 ways. But the truth is, it was easier to connect with him because he was more like me. Because he was more direct. Because I don't know. Because the dynamics were established that way since they were little and I never tried to change them." "And why?" I asked. "Why was it easier not to try?" "Because it required effort," he admitted. "Because it meant confronting my own failures as a father. Because with Alexander, everything flowed naturally, and with you, I had to be more intentional, and that made me feel like a bad father. So I avoided situations where that was obvious instead of working to improve." "I need you to understand something," I told him. "I can't go back to having the type of relationship where I'm constantly waiting for you to value me and you're constantly prioritizing Alexander. I can't and I won't do it. If we're going to have any kind of relationship from now on, it has to be different." "Whatever you want," he said quickly. "Whatever you need. It's not that simple," I explained. "You can't just say yes to everything now to compensate for years of emotional neglect. We need to start from zero, slow, with realistic expectations." "What does that mean in practical terms?" he asked. "It means we're going to have limited contact for a while," I explained. "Maybe a call every 2 weeks. Maybe a visit a month. No message bombardment, no showing up at my house without warning, no pressuring me for family events or gatherings where Alexander is until I'm ready." "And when will you be ready?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe never. Maybe someday. But that can't be your motivation for behaving differently. You can't be a better father just to get me back. You have to be a better father because you genuinely want to be." We talked for 2 more hours that day. We both cried. We said difficult things to each other. I established very clear boundaries. I made it very clear to him that if at any point I felt he was returning to his old patterns, I'd distance myself again without remorse. He accepted everything, promised to work on himself regardless of whether our relationship improved or not. It's been 3 months since the wedding now. My dad and I talk every 2 weeks. As we agreed. The conversations are weird, kind of awkward still. We're learning to communicate in a completely new way. I haven't seen Alexander since before all this. He sent me a very generic apology message like 3 weeks later that they obviously forced him to send. I read it and didn't respond. I don't feel a need to have a relationship with him at this point in my life. Maybe someday, but not now. Richard continues to be amazing. He comes to dinner at the house every week. He helped me plant a vegetable garden in the yard. Christopher and he have become good friends. Christopher's grandmother doesn't recognize who I am anymore, but she always gets happy when we visit her. She says, "I have a pretty smile." I don't know how to end this story because honestly it hasn't ended. It's still developing. There are days where I feel guilty for not forgiving my dad faster. There are days where I feel strong for maintaining my boundaries. There are days where I just feel tired of everything. Yesterday, my dad sent me a photo of him in therapy, like a selfie in the waiting room with the message, "Session 23. I don't know if that's weird or if it's his way of showing me he's doing the work. I responded with a thumbs up emoji because I didn't know what else to say. Christopher asked me last week if I regretted anything. I thought about it a lot before responding. I regret not having established boundaries earlier, I told him, having waited 29 years to say it wasn't acceptable how they treated me. But I don't regret the wedding. Asking Richard to walk me, any of the decisions I made afterwards. He hugged me and said, "I'm proud of you." And that, coming from someone who really sees me and values me, means more than any validation I ever sought from my dad. I guess the conclusion, if there has to be one, is that sometimes setting boundaries feels like cruelty, but it's actually survival. That it's okay to prioritize your peace of mind over making the people who hurt you happy. That family isn't always the one that shares your blood, but the one that chooses to be present when it matters. And that healing isn't linear. It's not a process with a clear end date. It's simply waking up each day and deciding what kind of relationships you deserve to have in your life. My dad is trying. That's undeniable. Is it enough? I don't know yet. Will it ever be enough? Maybe. Do I care? If it isn't? Less and less. Because I learned I can't base my value on how much my father loves me. That my value exists independently of whether he can see it or not. And that realization, although painful, has been the most liberating of my life.